What's up? My name is Scott Ian, and I'm here in a studio in Chicago, and I'm about to divulge to you, the loyal listener, all the secrets of my life. They've been trying to get me to do this for a long time. Finally, I'm ready. This is going to be all about guitars and amps and being in the studio and songwriting and everything that entails being in a heavy metal band for, 67, 68 years now, or something like that. I know I look pretty good, huh? So that's it. This is going to be all about me, all about my world, and I hope you enjoy it. So sit back, crack a cold one. Here we go. In the beginning, there was a Fender Twin Reverb, which was the first amp I ever owned. And that's where this whole experiment started as far as me trying to create this sound that I always heard in my head, this sound that I wanted to be able to, obtain through a guitar and an amp. And after about 6 months of guitar lessons, I convinced my parents that I was serious enough about guitar. I had a really cheap acoustic, and I stayed with it. And I think I was able to convince them that the guitar wasn't just going to get thrown in the G.I. Joe pile in the corner of the basement where, all the other toys ended up. So after about 6 months, they broke down, and I wanted a Stratocaster so bad. It's all I wanted was a Fender Strat. And didn't get the Strat. I got a Fender Tele Deluxe, but I did get the Fender Twin. And I got an Electro Harmonix big muff pedal, which was a fuzz box back then. And that's where the experiment basically started. Plugged it all in, got it together, and did my best to sound like Tony Iommi or Johnny Ramone or Ace Frehley. I mean, that's all I wanted. I wanted this heavy, kind of fat, chunky, rhythmic tone. So it was a case of, listening to records and listening to my sound and just thinking like, maybe the low end's kind of weird, or it's too fuzzy, or it's not fuzzy enough, or it just sounds like shit overall. And, just kind of constantly experimenting until with that combination, with that guitar, that fuzz box, and that amp, I actually was able to come up with something that I felt cool about, that I thought was really cool and made me happy to play with. And I think that's the most important thing with any gear that you own. Maybe you don't have the best gear in the world, but you experiment enough, you'll be able to come up with something that's going to make you happy. And that's the whole point of playing guitar in the first place. Right from the beginning, I always felt like I wanted to play with other people. For me, sitting around in the house by myself just playing guitar, as much fun as that was, the idea for me was always to be able to get out there and play with a drummer. Play with a bass player, play with another guitar player. I wanted to be able to jam with a band, and that seemed so much more exciting to me, than just sitting at home playing songs or practicing scales or whatever else. So right from an early age, it was always my quest to just find other musicians. So at school, obviously, you kind of find like-minded individuals that we were all into the same music. It was we were the few long-haired kids in our school at the time and wearing leather jackets, and you find out, oh, we're into the same stuff. Oh, guess what? I play guitar too. And then, you end up starting to jam with people. And instantly, for me, just being able to bounce off somebody else, just jamming on stuff was so much more fun, And then if you could actually get a drummer in the mix, that just made it the best, because actually playing with a drummer, even as cheesy as it may sound, it makes you feel like you're actually playing in a band, for the first time, because there's someone actually back there rocking the drums rather than just sitting there with another guitar player or something. So that was always the goal right from the beginning for me, was to be able to jam with other people. Even before I started playing guitar, hard rock was definitely what drew me into music. It was really guitar-driven hard rock music. I remember riding in the car with my parents and wanting them to change the radio station to the station where I would hear music like that. And when I first, started getting an allowance and I would go out and buy my first records, I was absolutely drawn to guitar rock. It's the sound that caught my ear. It's the sound that was like in my heart. It was in my brain. It was my whole soul was like, this is my music. This is what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I just felt a huge connection to to the guitar, and especially the heavier the riff, the better as the years went on. I mean, listening to The Who probably was the first thing that really even got me to want to play guitar, because I thought Pete Townsend was just the coolest. I mean, he would play these huge chords, and he would have that big windmill going on, which I'm not even going to attempt because I've learned my lesson too many times by, breaking my thumb on the guitar. That's why Pete can do it and I can't. But I was totally into guitar-driven rock, and from, Pete Townsend and The Who on, I was always just looking for the next band, the next guy doing something that just moved me, something that made me, want to get off my ass and run around the room and bang my head and, just go nuts and pick up my guitar and go nuts. And then you hear someone like Johnny Ramone with his relentless right hand, I mean, just nonstop, which just, it made me go crazy. It made me nuts. Or, someone like Ace Frehley with just, I mean, just crushing me, all these riffs. As a kid, you hear these things and it's like, I mean, the feeling if you understand what I'm talking about. All the way till now, it's 2004 and I'm still listening, to new bands and new guys who are coming around and who's stretching the genre and who's doing cool things with the guitar and just who's keeping it aggressive. And that's what it's always been about for me, is that inherent aggression that there is in guitar music. I'd have to say the biggest early influence and probably the biggest influence overall on my guitar playing would be Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, because I consider Sabbath to me, that's heavy metal. They were the first heavy metal band. Tony's playing, to me, defines heavy metal. He created the metal riff. And so from the first time I ever heard Sabbath, and not even the first record, because I got into their second album before I got into the first album. I got into the Paranoid record first, and of course that song, it's such an icon, so you just sit there trying to figure it out as a kid. I mean, and just making a complete mess out of it. But eventually, being able to play along with it enough where, you could actually kind of chug along with him. And just learning that downstroke, which is probably, the most important thing I've ever learned in, my career, because it became such a defining part of my playing as a guitar player. So it just was learning that, just being able to go like that in time, which doesn't seem like it's a hard thing, but, it actually really is, especially once it starts getting faster. Being able to just do something as simple as that, but keep it in time, that all comes from Tony Iommi. I found the best way, to be able to learn how to play once I decided to stop taking lessons, because I felt like my guitar teacher at the time really wasn't teaching me anything I wanted to know. And I felt like guitar started to become like school, and it started to become like homework. And that's the last thing I wanted with something, that was so much fun for me to do. I didn't look at it as something what do you mean I got to do homework? Like, it's not about that. It's just about, the joy of playing my guitar. And I found it much more fun to sit and put on a record on the turntable and just sit there and listen to parts over and over again, and actually learn how to play the riff. Because obviously I already knew how to play bar chords and things like that. So it was easy enough just by ear, to listen to what a guy was doing, and even sometimes just slow it down if you had to and figure out what he was doing. But I would sit for hours and hours with records, just, listen to them and just try and copy as best I could. Of course, as the years went by, I would realize most of the time I was figuring things out terribly wrong, but it still helped develop, how I became as a guitar player, and, just from the influences that I have. I was able to take what I learned from these guys off records, and it just kind of turned into my own thing. Basically, if you're just starting out on guitar and you're into heavy metal, there's like 3 things you really want to know, because everyone asks me these same 3 questions. It's about down picking, it's about alternating, and it's about triplets and chugging. And between those three, that's all you ever need to know how to do to be in a metal band. It's just a case of putting them all together, you know, obviously with different chords and different styles, but it's all about that for me. It's always been all about that right hand and just learning how to just be as tight and precise as you can as a rhythm player. That's what everybody wants to know how to do, and everyone wants to know how to do it fast. Faster, 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 faster. Everyone wants to know that. And I hate to say this, boys and girls, but really, it's all about practice. It's about practice and commitment. That's really, I mean, that's what I did. I would sit there with my guitar in front of the TV, watching whatever, and just sit there like this, just down picking away until, you know, it just becomes second nature, where you're playing in time and your speed comes up and you're able to just down pick anything to the point where you could down pick as fast as you can alternate, which is kind of tough. Alternating too, just starting out. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. It's gonna feel weird at first, of course. You're gonna be all uncoordinated and you're gonna be hitting other strings, but so sit there and watch your hand and just focus. Focus on that E string and just get that down, up going. And eventually, the speed's gonna come. The more you practice, the more you commit, the more you strengthen that right hand, the speed's just gonna come and come until, you know, you'll be able to play faster than you ever even need to play, truthfully. And the same goes for triplets and quadruplets and quintuplets and octagonuplets. Same thing. All that kind of stuff. It just comes with practice. That's all you got to do. So when you just find yourself with nothing better to do, if you're just wasting time, don't waste time. Pick up the guitar and practice. Just keep that right hand going. Keep going until it's numb. Keep going until your wrist hurts, your forearm feels like it's going to explode, and then keep going. And you'll be picking like a maniac in no time. One thing to make sure, when you're alternating like this, you gotta be sure that your upstroke is just as strong as your downstroke. Because otherwise, well, first of all, you're not gonna play in time, but it also has to do with just a riff. I mean, you can't downpick everything because rhythmically, it's just not gonna work. Not every riff is meant to be downpicked. If something's got a groove or a swinging kinda, with a groove like that, you gotta have the upstroke in there. You wouldn't wanna just go, because it's stiff. So that's why it's just gotta be. You wanna hit that upstroke hard because otherwise you're only using half your hand's capabilities. If you're only ever just picking downwards, it's ridiculous. You gotta be able to come up too. So make sure you practice that upstroke. When you first learn guitar, especially if you've got a really, you know, stick up the ass type of guitar teacher, one of the things they're gonna tell you right away is your hand placement on the neck. They'll be very, very just tight ass about this. And that's, you know, the proper form where your hand is back here with your thumb is way back here and you want your hand out, you know, and then all your fingers are up here, which is like really awkward, and that's for dudes who play with their guitar like a dork all the way up here. That's not gonna work in heavy metal. It's just like, you know, maybe one or two guys can get away with that because they're unbelievable, but just in general, this is really weird, dorky, and uncomfortable. And I never understood, why can't I just keep my hand in a position that's comfortable for me to play in? Why do I have to play like this? I don't care if so-and-so plays like this. This is where my hand feels comfortable. So what if it's sloppy? It's what makes me play better. So a lot of people will tell you, oh, you're not supposed to have your thumb hang here and this and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? Whatever's most comfortable for you, that's what's important. That's the most important thing I think about playing guitar, is what makes you play better, what makes you feel better, and what makes you happier. Not so much as perfect form. I mean, look, yeah, if you want to be some virtuoso jazz, flamenco guy, I was going to name names or whatever, maybe that's important, but we're talking about metal here, and worrying about where your thumb is the least of your worries. So don't worry about your thumb hanging over the neck. I don't think Hendrix ever worried about his thumb hanging over the neck. So don't worry about that. Play what makes you happy. Another huge part of rhythm guitar playing in heavy metal is the palm mute. What is the palm mute? It sounds like some kind of kung fu move. But basically it's this big fat chunky part, the chunky part of your palm on the side here, and that where it's sitting, right above the bridge, and just kind of rests on those strings, and that's what enables you to get that fat, thick, chunky sound like that. If you were to pull your palm off, obviously it opens it up, and that's great too, especially if you're playing AC/DC type stuff. But you get that palm on there, and that's like the basis for, at least 8 million heavy metal riffs. So it's just a case of finding what's comfortable, where it sits. You don't want to push too hard because, as you can hear, it gets kind of weird and you start pushing the strings too hard. It's just sitting that palm on there and being able to control it, especially when you're playing at loud volumes, because without that palm mute at a loud volume, your guitar's going to feed back, it's going to go crazy, and it's like you need some kind of giant lasso to bring it back in. So, you got that big open chord, and instantly you could just... So that's what the palm mute is. Okay, so let's say you've got it together. All your picking's coming together. You're down picking, you're alternating, chugging, palm muting, whatever you want to call it. You've got it together. You're playing along with records. You're tearing it up. You're jamming with your friends. Now you're thinking, like, how do you write a riff? How do you write a song? How does that all come together? Time to give away a big secret right here. Basically, for me, it was always about just what I was listening to, who I was influenced by. And I mean, you hear things in your head and you express it on the guitar. An example of just how a riff or a song comes together, on the last Anthrax album, We've Come For You All, we had a song called What... song called What Doesn't Die, and it was based out of a rhythmic thing that Charlie had been doing on his double kick, where he was just going like this with his kick drums. So obviously I start following that. So you come up with this rhythmic pattern, and that starts building into a song, and then you start putting a groove into it. And then what ends up happening is, you start coming up with the parts. Okay, well, that sounds cool. That could be like a really cool intro, So, all right, then we need to get into like a verse riff. So, all right, where does it go from there? These are the actual questions we ask ourselves. What comes next? Like, where would we go after this part? So that's how the song starts building. So the next part comes up. We come up with this riff part. It's like, it sounds like it needs to go fast. This sounds like a fast song. It sounds like it needs to be a fast riff. Kind of old school Anthrax, like 1987-ish, Among the Living-ish type of Anthrax riff, which then turned into... something like that. And it's, it just starts to build and build. And then it's like, all right, but let's go back to that rhythmic part. Let's go back to the intro for the chorus, because that part is so big. But instead of doing it with just the same double kick thing, now it'll be with a big fat groove and a beat behind it. So it changes it. So it changes it. Then you get to the middle part. Okay, we need a breakdown. You know, we need a big breakdown, like a middle eight, a bridge in this thing. So I'm thinking, like, all right, where would we go? What's something in my mind? I'm thinking, we need a riff that if I'm going to play this riff, I'm going to look out on that crowd, and it's just going to be like a popcorn machine. It's going to be like dropping kernels into the hot oil, and the crowd is, you know, the crowd's going to hear this riff and just go insane. And I just started coming up with this groove. I had this groove in my head, just really simple and chromatic. Just something, it just sounds like it's growing and building and growing and building. Something like that, and there's like, you know, it all just seems to fit together, and you know, next thing you know, you have a song. So I know I'm breaking it down and making it sound really simple, and it isn't, but at the same time, it really should be. I think all the best songs we've ever written as a band have been the things that have come the easiest and been the simplest to write, not the ones that take a month to finish and you keep coming back to it and trying to, you know, you just keep pushing and pushing. Sometimes those songs turn out great too, but over the history of our career, our best songs, whether they be songs like Safe Home or Only or I Am the Law or What Doesn't Die or Metal Thrashing Mad, songs like this, they were the ones that were written in like 15 minutes. It's just like, bleh, and they like, wow, you know, I had to get that out of me. So those are the ones, you know, that I look back on and say, you know, it just pops in your head. It's like a light bulb, and you just got to get it out. And you got to listen to those things when they pop in your head. No matter how it may sound to you, just pick up that guitar and work it out. From when I first started playing up until now, obviously technology and the gear has just gotten so much better and worse in some ways. But as far as for what I do and for the sound that I was always looking for as a kid, it's become a lot easier to get that together in a short amount of time. I mean, I was always just looking for me, the sound that I heard in my head was this really big, fat, low-end sound with a crunchy edge, a real crunchy edge, but yet all tight at the same time. And that's really the only way I could describe it in words. You know, I didn't want something that just had too much bottom that would be muddy. Definitely didn't want something that had too much top end that sounds like bees trying to escape a hive. Like that nobody, that's, you know, that doesn't do anybody any good, you know, or too much mid-range where it's really whiny in the middle. I wanted it to be really warm, yet really aggressive and really inviting, yet really disturbing at the same time. And somehow I, you know, just over the years and through so many different combinations of amps and pedals and guitars and pickups and strings and whatnot, I was finally able to, right around 83, 84, the time of the first Anthrax record, really kind of nail it down at that time, which when I first started recording and playing out live with Anthrax, it was a really basic setup of Jackson guitar with a Seymour Duncan JB pickup, Marshall JCM 800 head, and I had this thing called a TC Electronic box, which was basically all it was a boost that I used between the guitar and the amp to boost the pickup signal a little bit, so that when it went into the front of the amp, it would break it up a little more, adding just a little bit more distortion to the whole thing. And somehow I was able to, you know, after years of experimenting, that's what I came down to. Then you could fast forward, you know, up to about the year 2000 or so, and after having played with the Marshalls for so long and using the same setup for so long